Good afternoon. My name is Greg Wadley with CTC and Associates. I'm the Clear Roads Administrator. We're here for the final webinar for the project entitled Evaluation of SSI and WSI variables. The research team from the Narwhal Group and Western Transportation Institute at Montana State includes Lee Sturgis, Chris Albrecht, and Laura Fay. Before I turn it over to them, I do want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Clear Roads website later this week for viewing at your convenience. We also ask that everybody stays on mute today so that there's no background noise. However, if you have any comments or questions, please enter them into the chat box and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So I think that's all for housekeeping items. So I'm going to turn it over to the research team. So whenever you guys are ready.
Thanks, Greg. Can everyone hear me okay? I guess you can't say it, but let me know if you can hear me, Greg. My name is Chris Albrecht, and we've been in touch a little bit over the last year and a half or so. This project has been a long, very detailed effort, and I'd like to thank Laura and Lee and Natalie for doing way more work than I have, and all the great work they've done, and the input from this TAC meeting. Excuse me. Oops, trying to go forward here. Okay. Okay, hold on one sec. I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to get the things to go forward. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. Just to remind everybody, I'm going to talk a little bit about the research team. A little background on the project, the objectives, but spend most of our time talking about the project.
Hey, Chris, this is Greg Wadley. You're breaking up a lot, so I don't know if you need to switch over to a phone or if you need to just sort of reposition yourself. Sometimes I know voice over internet protocol acts funny if you're sort of away from your computer or moving around.
And what we found, and then a little bit about the findings and where we go. Once again, the group. Oops, hello? Okay. Anyway, we're looking for best practices in order to normalize weather. Oh. Go ahead. Who's there? Was that Greg?
Chris, this is Greg. Yeah, I just want to let you know that that you're breaking up a lot, and so I don't know if it. You were much better when before we started. So I don't know if there's something that you can repeat that was different, but from what you're doing now.
Okay, well, I'm going to open up this laptop again and see.
There you sound a lot better.
Yeah, it's because of my laptop. So it's great. You can hear me better. We won't be able to mute myself here, it looks like. Okay, let's start here. Project background was look at performance measurement, and that's seeking to maximize efficiency, effectiveness of our operations, and the safety indices, weather indices, severity indices really help normalize weather across regions or across the states. You can get an idea of how you've done because weather obviously isn't the same every year. But we want to distill the storm characteristics into a value that helps us compare one storm to another. There's a lot of challenges that come with that. Obviously, we've talked about the differences in the states that are involved in clear roads and the weather you have. It's really hard to come up with one solution for everyone. And then we'll talk about that here a little more in a minute. The objectives of the project were identify agencies that use indices, determine the variables measurements that they all use, and gather that together into one place, essentially, and recommending the most reliable variables with the highest correlation. And we've done that, but once again, there's no perfect answer for everyone. But we want to create a flexible spreadsheet tool that allows agencies to evaluate the different SSI and WSI that would help them the most. And please, as I go through here, feel free to raise your hand and Greg interrupt as I go. I'm going to be turning a lot of this over to Laura and Natalie. Any of you want to get through and add anything too. Once again, the project tasks were literature review, the survey and a follow-up, the data analysis crunching method, or part of that, then our recommendations and agency follow-up, and then the spreadsheet tool, which I think we'll have a little bit of time to go through, and then our final report that put it all together. The literature review summarized domestic and international methods from folks all over the world, a lot of U.S. states and then agencies, and Laura can elaborate on those that participated, but I think you all saw those. They're the usuals. Looking at both operational and theorized indices, and it included information on variables, methods, and equations. And I think there were 10 final equations that we used in the end that were the best examples. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So that was the literature review. The survey of practice went out as a web-based survey that you all saw. It looked at variables used, how the data is collected, those equations once again, and how they're being used within the agency. And who was contacted were divisions within the DOT, private partners, some academic partners, and ultimately there were 18 usable responses from agencies that were gathered. So that was task 2, happened early on in the project. Also found a valuable tool to provide context for WMO performance and costs. And the survey agencies want the indices to be reliable and accurate and represent their winter conditions rather than just simply a less accurate tool. Most agencies are not satisfied with their current WSI. That's why we have this project essentially. And then often they're critical missing critical data for each of those agencies. And that's probably one of the biggest obstacles to overcome. And special weather conditions are a challenge in WSIs as well. So looking at those survey results, Laura, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add or elaborate on that I just went over from the survey?
No, thanks. That was good.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then, still some more findings. Real-time WSIs could help improve maintenance instead of post-storm analyses. Using an index developed elsewhere is not advised. Need to be adjusted, so another state definitely can't necessarily won't apply to you. Building one in-house should involve the WMO, weather experts, maintenance managers, data storage, etc. You really need to get everybody involved that's involved in your weather operations and maintenance, involved in building this indice. All right, and based on that, we did some follow-up surveys. Most of this was Lee doing this. Communicated with 14 agencies and talked about variables, methods, and context. Most of you are familiar with what came through the follow-up surveys. Then it was time for us to analyze the data and the collection methods with the goal of learning about the reliability of the variables and the data methods. Just because a lot of agencies use some sort of method doesn't mean it's necessarily statistically valid or really reliable. So it was really important to really look in deep how effective those indices really were. So the reliability of instrumentation was important, the data collection methods, and the variables and algorithms that describe the severity. And we put together summary findings from that, which went out to the TAC probably several months ago. Ultimately, there were 10 methods that were described in detail in the report, and these were essentially equations and that different folks have used from stuff back several years ago in the 90s from the Bosley method up to what states are using currently. Laura or Natalie, I don't know if you want to comment on any of these. These might come up later, but these are the 10 that we found most reliable.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, this is Laura, that this is a good list of WSIs that are being used currently or in the past, but it doesn't mean it's all of them. And we really wanted to focus on methods that have been used and applied, not just methods that were developed but then shelved, which I could think of about 4 to 5 of those that have been developed and then just not really implemented at an agency. So we wanted to take the big guns that are being used and modified so that folks could have potentially more success moving forward with these.
Thanks, Laura. And from these various sources that Laura just discussed, there were 25 key variables that were identified that were common in all of them or that were the most effective. I won't go into all of these right here, but they go from atmospheric to pavement to precip, all the different data that you would normally collect. And then there's 17 different data sources identified from road weather specific data sources using federal government, other models and special mention networks, databases, different sources of data all over the place. But there were 17 that were identified as most useful. And please chime in anytime you want, Laura. Laura, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you might just want to comment how we looked at them. You had put the slide together. I'll let you comment.
Right. So, I think one of the best things about this report is the detailed description of, each calculation method, the data they use, pros and cons of each method. And then for also identifying all the data sources. I think a lot of folks don't realize how much data is available out there, but that not any data set is perfect, and that each is going to have its strengths and weaknesses. So there may be a really strong data set out there, but maybe you don't have sufficient network in your state or your region of the country. And this slide kind of puts all of that together. This slide shows the different weather severity indices methods on the left-hand side listed vertically. And then on the right-hand side, it shows some of the different tools, data sources that go into that specific method. So you can see from this slide that a lot of folks are trying to use RWIS data in some capacity. Agencies have invested heavily in their RWIS network, and they want to use it as a tool. But you'll also see that a lot of these agencies that are using RWIS are also using other data sources to fill in. And there's a couple reasons. It could be that maybe certain data pieces they don't have confidence in, or maybe their sensor network doesn't catch that kind of data. There's all sorts of different reasons, but I think it's really important to see that for most of these tools, they're using multiple data sources and merging those to develop their weather severity index. Okay, you can take it from here, Chris.
Okay, and I think most of us realize that too, and we often have RWIS sites. We're not, there might be a nearby AWAS site we use to supplement our data. So it is a mix throughout all the folks that we talk to. Testified in the recommendation, we summarize the most reliable variables and collection methods and equations. One important point to make is that the variability of data collection abilities and needs, they range a lot across agencies. So developing a standalone reference guide for recommendations was the goal, and that was put together, deliverable as a reference guide at the end of task 5. Laura, nuts and bolts of contemporary SSI, WSI, if you want to add to this, you can, but involve the method breakdown, variables breakdown, data sources, and special weather scenarios. And for example, recommendations for the development or improvement of a WSI start with identifying goals, the key personnel, variables, and then this cyclical end to it where you have to keep going through the cycle of developing them, their application, and improvement over time. And this is something that can be learned by all the agencies involved, and something that was a key recommendation. Okay. And then looking at this, do you want to explain this one, Laura, if you want to go into a little more detail?
Yeah, so part of choosing which weather severity index is going to be appropriate for your agency is really asking kind of a big, deep question, which is, what are your goals for this? What do you want to get out of this? How do you want to apply this? And really thinking through that process. And then from there, working into, okay, well, if this is our goal, what data do we have available to us? And what data could we get that could help get us there? And then determining very practically, okay, how are we going to get the data? How are we going to apply the data? How do we get access to it? I can tell you from just working with Maryland on Weather Severity Index project that even though they have access to their RWIS data, getting that information to maybe a university or a third-party vendor that's helping you is not always easy. So there's all these hurdles along the way of getting access, determining then, do you have data resolution? How close are your RWIS placed in your state? Can you fill in with National Weather Service locations or other sites? And then as you go through the process of picking which method you're going to use, and getting results that come out of it, determining, is this giving you the information you were hoping, and how can you then apply it? And then do you need to go back and say, no, we need to add more variables, we need to add more data, we're not getting the resolution we need, et cetera. So what you see in a lot of these is that this is all a cyclical process, from determining who should be at the table to how to really jump into a weather severity index. You need to constantly be grading, is this tool helping you? And if not, why? And what can we do to improve it?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Okay, I won't go into, this is another example of that, isn't it, Laura? The decision tree?
Yeah, this is just like starting at the beginning of the recommendations guide all the way to the end of every step, everything to think about, and then again, going back and reevaluating, is it working for us? If not, what can we do to make it better?
And this is a key point of discussion that we probably will have after we're done with our presentation, is what you guys do next and the options you have. Okay, so here are the options 1, 2, and 3 using index, modifying one, or developing a unique index. That was essentially our base recommendations. And we can go over these a little bit later, but each section in that Task 5 recommendations document talks about lessons learned, essentially. Task 6 was agency follow-up again, was getting more feedback on what we put together. This happened, I think, earlier this summer or so is about where we're at in this point. And in other words, how everything was fitting, so we're getting feedback on where we're in the process, but you were all involved in that most likely. Then the spreadsheet tool. This is the opportunity where we put everything into an Excel spreadsheet that included those methods, discovered in the project, and see how they would necessarily work for everyone. So going from your specific situation, how you would apply these. We have the spreadsheet tool available. It's up on your website. Laura, did you want to go through it at all, or did anybody have questions on that? I know we have limited time, so I didn't want to spend too much time on one particular thing.
Yeah, why don't you go forward and I'll kind of walk through the slides, and then if we want to bring up the tool, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, what is it based on? Laura, you can explain this real quick, and then if they want to see the tool, like you said.
Right. Yeah. So this, there's a million spreadsheets in this presentation and in the final report, but I think they're important to kind of visualize kind of where you start, what questions you need to ask to point you in the right direction of what methods for SWE calculation you might end up at. Chris, you can go to the next slide.
Yep, hold on, I'm sorry. Just missed the link. There you go.
Okay, so the spreadsheet tool really did follow the report. So if you read through it and then you're like, okay, let's see if there's a weather severity index that exists out there for me that I can apply and tweak, then this is the way to do it. So the way the spreadsheet tool works is step 1, you identify different weather parameters or key concerns in your area. And then from there, I'll show you in a sec, different data pieces or variables of data that you could collect become highlighted that are associated with that weather condition. And then from that, you can select the variables either that you would like to consider in a weather severity indices or variables that you actually have data for. And then the third step is it will highlight for you which different weather severity index methods use these different variables and so address those weather concerns that you have. So Chris, you can go to the next slide. So it's a little hard to see on these kind of shrunken screens in this presentation format, but this is basically what the spreadsheet tool does. It's a locked spreadsheet tool and it has logic built into it. So you start with step 1, and let's say you have concerns about all snow, freezing rain, widespread frost, and blowing snow. So then you would click those buttons on the left-hand side. And then in step 2, all the weather variables that pop up associated with those, and then say, oh yes, but I also want to consider friction And so you highlight all the step 2 variables that you are interested in. And then step 3 will highlight the different methods that we highlighted, those 10 weather severity indices that we went into detail on. Which ones use that data to make their calculation method, so that then you could go back and in detail read about, for example, the Idaho method, because you wanted to look at friction and they incorporate friction in theirs. It seems like a good fit given that you use lots of RWIS data. So that was the goal of the tool. Step 3 does not in the screenshot show all of the different weather severity indices methods, and there is always one that's available that says develop your own, because we want to highlight that while there are a lot of methods out there and a lot that use different meteorological parameters and road condition parameters, they may not be the right fit for you, and so you may want to consider developing your own. You can go to the next slide, Chris. So really what the spreadsheet tool does is it's a flowchart tool that lets your agency determine if any of the existing weather severity indices that are out there could be tweaked or modified to fit your agency's needs before you do invest. And it is a huge investment of time and money to develop your own weather severity index. All right, Chris, I'm done.
Okay, great. Then obviously we put all this information that Laura talked about and I mentioned earlier from the literature review and gathering all this information. That's all been documented in the final report, in addition to the building and all the logic that went in to the tool. And that final report and this presentation were the end of that process for us, obviously, but for this project, but not for you folks. So that's where I think we need to get into from this point forward. What are your concerns? What are your issues? And what do you guys do with this mountain of information and make it really work for you? So one of the key conclusions from that was that the agency's capabilities, access to data, your individual goals, your department's goals, and within the DOT and the DOT-wide goals, your partnerships, different climates, all that make it difficult or are different enough that a single index will not really work for everyone, and we know that. And I made the point to Laura yesterday. My wife's a physical therapist, and I'm always complaining about lower back issues, and there isn't just one physical therapy or treatment that works for everybody. It depends on what your particular situation is. So you really need to go to an expert and figure out what your issue is and what you have available to you in order to find the right solution. I think that's part of the situation that Laura mentioned here, where you need to work internally with what you have available and who you have available, maybe bring in some outside expertise to help you select or build what's perfect for you. So, and I'll leave that open now for you, Greg, if you want to take questions from the TAC about any of this or where we go from here, or Laura, if you have anything to add. I'd like to hear from you folks.
All right, well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, right now, I've not received any questions or comments in the chat box. However, since we do have some time, if anybody does have a question or a comment, I just ask you to take yourself off mute, ask your question or comment, and then place yourself back on mute. So I'll open it up for some discussion here. All right, let's see, I did just see something pop up in the chat box. So Cliff Spoonmore from Wyoming asked, are we basing this on individual RWIS sites?
So Cliff, you know, each organization that indicated that they use RWIS, I think, and everyone on the call will know that when you have your RWIS sites, they are a standalone site that sometimes may or may not have good data. And so what ends up happening usually is that you aggregate as much of the data as you can. I'm guessing you're talking about resolution and providing data down to the RWIS site level. But you know, some states have, you know, 100+ ARWA sites, some have 5 or less. So really, the quality of your ARWIS data and the quantity of it will determine, I guess, how good your SWE is going to be if you're using your ARWIS data, and also the resolution of your weather severity index. You know, your confidence bubble can only go so far away from a good quality data source. So filling in the gaps is really kind of what aggregating a lot of data sources allows you to do. I'm not sure if I answered your question there.
I come off of mute. The thing that really concerned me is we might have a storm in Wyoming that hits only the southern part or the northern part, but then everybody goes, well, how was your winter over the entire state? And that's where I wasn't sure on this, if we have to just kind of individually run this every month or whatever to try to get this, because like I say, the storm may have hit the southern part of the state and the northern had a great month, but not the south. So I'm just not sure. I guess I'd have to see how this works, feeding the beast type situation.
Right. No, that's a great question. And it's, you know, you're getting into the technical side of, you know, okay, you have a weather severity index, how do we apply it? Some folks will calculate their weather severity index annually, you know, for the whole winter season. So in that case, you would lose that resolution of the South getting hit hard. It would kind of average out the whole state. But a lot of folks are now going by month or by even individual storm events. And what you can do is, depending on the tool that you use to visualize your weather severity output, and there is a whole chapter on different visualization tools, is you can then create different maps for either a region, a specific ARWIS site, that shows that, you know, for the month of February, the southern part of your state was severe compared to past years, or severe compared to the northern part. But overall, you know, the northern part was very average. So it really comes down to how, you know, the level of effort you want to put into the visualization. I would definitely suggest taking a close look at that chapter and seeing if any of those different methods work best. But I'm guessing, based on what you said, that you would want to run this probably for every single storm event, so that you can then say, you know, this region of the state got hit hard. This is how it relates to past winters, whereas other parts of the state didn't. And so maybe they're, you know, you have to scale your operations and your budget based on what actually happened. And so I guess the finer resolution you can get on processing of this, the better it's going to be as a tool in that aspect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, hearing none right now. I just want to let you know that the final report has been submitted, reviewed, and revised, and it is now currently being. And I will post. What I was just thinking of is I can post this that version up on the members only side of the website until we being CTC, finalize the formatting and of the report and get it posted up on the public facing side. So I will do that so that anybody who needs access to this final report in the next couple of weeks before we get the final one posted can still access it. And like I said, I will get this webinar posted hopefully by the end of the week. All right, anybody have any questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you for joining in. Hope you have a great rest of your week and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
That's good. Thanks again. Bye.